welcome back to Pepcoding. So the question which we will talk about today is called encoding and decoding tiny URL. You will be given an actual URL as the input and you have to convert it into a tiny URL. Okay, and this will be done in the function encode. So you have to create this tiny URL. We have all obviously worked with tiny URL once or the other time. Basically you will have a URL, a long URL, okay, and you have to convert it into a shorter URL with a string like this with random characters, right? And you have to make sure that no two long URLs should have the same random string, okay. So in the encode function, what you have to do is you will be given the original URL which is given as the input, and you have to you have to make it into a short URL and then you have to return it. This short URL will be the argument for the decode function, and for this decode function you have to return the corresponding long URL of the short URL which you just created in the encode function. So this is what you have to do in the question. So I am going to insist you to try this on your own, and if you are not able to solve it, then please watch the solution video for reference. Okay, now let's try to code this. Before that, we will understand what we have to do in the question. Okay, so over here we have two functions, encode as well as decode. We have been given a long URL, okay, as the input, and in this long URL, I have to create a short URL for this long URL and I have to return it. Okay. Now, when we are working with the short URL, we don't have to work with this part. Just assume that this part has already been dealt with. You only have to work with this part right here. So you have to create a random string and it can be of any length. It could be A, B, Z, B3, A, anything like that. Okay, just the random string, and you have to make sure that the length of the string is as small as possible. Okay, so this is for the encode function. Then for the decode function, you will pass this value as the argument for the decode function, and for this particular short URL, you have to return the corresponding long URL, basically the URL which was given to you originally in the code. And in the main function, it will be given to you as first we will call the encode function, and you will be sent the input URL as the argument, and for this function, the answer which you will return for the encode function will be passed as the argument for the decode function. So you have to work on these functions properly. So basically there are two things which we need to work on. Okay, 1 second. Alright, so there are two things which you need to work on. First, you have to generate a random string of n length, and even we are not sure what will be the length of the string which we will create. Okay, because like I discussed, it could be a string which is a simple A, B, C, or it could be a longer random string with A, B, 3, Z, D, E, let's say a $sign or anything like that, right? So we don't know the length which will be generated. Secondly, we have to make sure that no two long URLs have the same, no two long URLs have the same short URL. Okay, this is what you have to make sure of. So basically, if you have been given a long URL, then it cannot have two or more same corresponding short URLs, and or even different. Basically, if I generate one as YDEF4, then it cannot have another short URL, let's say ABC3ZD, nothing like this. Okay, for a short URL, you cannot have two or more corresponding long URLs. Also, you have to make sure that for any string, okay, for any long URL which you will get, you should only have one corresponding short URL, not more, not less. Okay, so First, let's work with this condition where we have to make sure that no two long URLs will have the same short URL. So since we are doing 1:1 mapping, for that we can easily use HashMap, right? And in the HashMap, we will use two strings. One will be the tiny URL, second will be the long URL. We are not aware of the length of the string which we will get. Let's say the first character randomly which I put over here was A. I'll go to the HashMap and search whether this short URL exists. If it exists, then I'll go back to this string, and to the next position I will append another random character. Let's say I search for these two, basically A3, and A3 is also there on the HashMap. That means there's still a long URL which has A3 as its short URL, corresponding short URL. So I place Z over. I go and search for A3Z, and let's say now I was not able to find it in the HashMap. So that means that there is no long URL which has such a random string, such a short URL. So what I'm going to do is, to the map, we will simply add this short URL, and corresponding to it, I will add the long URL which I am working with. Okay, so this will help me in generating the n-length random string also, and it will also ensure that no two long URLs will have the same short URL, right? Then next thing which I am working with is the decode function, right? So for the decode function, what I need is, I need to return the corresponding long URL of the short URL which I have generated. So what I'll do, for this short URL, I'll go and search in the map, and let's say over here at some random position, I'll find out the short URL which I was working with. So corresponding to it, the value will be the long URL, right? So that long URL I will return, and that will be my final answer. Okay, so now let's try to do coding for this, and I will discuss the rest of the part over here. So first thing which we need to do is, we need to create a map. So I'm going to create a map, and its type will be string, right? And let's name it as M. Then I want a string, right? The final answer string, and pass it as empty string in the beginning. Now I need to generate the first position, right, of the answer string, the first position. So I need a random character over there. So in the C++ language, we have a random function which returns to me the values of 0 to 1. Okay, where 1 is not included. So 0 to 1 is returned to me. Let's say the random value which I got was 0, 1, 5, 3, 3, 4, 2 or something like this. But there is no value which is corresponding to such a decimal value, right? There is no character value which is corresponding to such a ASCII value. So what I'm going to do is, if I multiply this by 10, I will get the values from 0 to 10. Second, 0 to 10. So this one will become 1.53342. So I will get the values from 0 to 10. Let's say if I multiply this by 100, so I will get the values from 0 to 100. So this will become 15.3342. Now in all these conditions, what I need to do is, I need to get rid of the decimal part, right? I cannot work with the decimal part when it comes to ASCII values. So what I'm going to do is, I'm going to simply change it into integer value, and that integer value which I will get from the randomized function, I will change it into character value so that it can take it as an ASCII value and put a character over there. So we are going to take a character value. Okay, then for this character value, I am going to take an integer value for the random function which I will multiply by 100. Okay, so we took the random function, multiplied the values by 100, made it into integer values to get rid of the decimal part, and then converted into character value for the ASCII values. After that, I have to work with the map. So when we are working with the map, let's say I had the value, I had the character A at the first position, and I have to check in the map whether this is present or not. If it is already present on the map, only then I will add the next value on the next position. Otherwise, I don't have to do that. So what will be the condition which I will be working with? So while m dot find sp is not equal to, one second, is not equal to m dot n. That means I am able to find this value on my map. In that case, what I am going to do? I am going to do the same for the rest of the positions. Next position, right? So I will keep on adding a new random character to the next position. Now there comes a point, let's say when we were discussing, we said that there was a string A3Z which was not available in the map. Okay, so when I come to this point, this loop will be exited. So I have to put the value of this string and its corresponding URL to the map. So map of SP will be equal to long URL. Now this is on the map and I will return the string. Okay. Next is the decode function. So when we are working with the decode function, we have to return the corresponding long URL of the short URL which we just generated. So I will go to my map and in this I will search the short URL which I generated, and corresponding to it the long URL which I have will be returned to me. Okay. Now let's try to run this program. 1 second. Okay, so over here the input I took was of the same URL which we have over here for the website. Okay, so I put this over here and in the output I have the exact same URL. So that means my code is working perfectly fine. I will not be able to submit this since we are still working on the test cases, but you have the proof that the code is working just fine. So I'm going to insist you to try this. Very soon you will be able to run this on the portal, obviously. So thank you for watching the video. Keep practicing. We will see each other in the next video. Till then, please like, share and subscribe to the channel. Thank you.